Hello everyone and a warm welcome to the Directions Live online webinar series by Esri Malaysia. My name is Amir Faisal and I am your host for today's session. Introducing today's presenter is Muhammad Akmal bin Jasman, a system architect at Esri Malaysia. As a system architect, Muhammad Akmal works with Esri Malaysia's application team to understand client requirements and provide the best IT infrastructure solutions possible. With a decade of experience in the IT sector, he has been involved in several projects with government agencies including JUPAM, JKR, and MACDI, and non-government agencies like Telekom Malaysia and SSM. He's worked on the installation and consultation of IT infrastructure for GIS and e-commerce applications in physical or virtual environments. So introducing the topic of today's webinar. So in this webinar, we shall learn and understand the security concepts in the cloud, specifically relating to the ArcGIS platform, and learn about the security controls public cloud providers offer and what they are ultimately responsible for when securing infrastructure in the cloud. So this webinar will also cover the fundamentals of cloud deployment and options, as well as approaches to defining security controls for customer environments hosted within Amazon Web Services. Now, without any further ado, I shall pass the presentation to Akmal. Over to you, Akmal.
Okay, thank you, Amir, for the introduction. So before we start today, I would like to say thank you for everybody for attending this webinar today. So as overview of the topic today, I will talk about the cloud itself. Maybe some of us still new to cloud, or some of you already hear about cloud, but because your organization didn't use it, you forgot the fundamental parts of the cloud. Second, where is Esri product sits in the cloud? What product is the highlights for today? Is it ArcGIS Enterprise? We will see it later. And third, what is the common organization security concern when moving to the cloud? And how cloud build confidence on their customers in terms of security by educating user of shared responsibility model. One of the major areas of interest from customers in relation to cloud adoption is security. In the past, there were concerns that the cloud providers were less secure. It is because the infrastructure that used to host the workload was not physically located at the customer side, or that it is also shared amongst many other customers. Even with those concerns, cloud computing just keep growing. More and more IT technology giants jump into cloud market as a service provider. And the question is why? Why is this cloud keep expanding? The answer is because the cloud is cheaper, consolidated, and regular. Business get the maximum benefit by leveraging cloud services and cloud-based infrastructure instead of purchasing their own server. With cloud services, management, maintenance, and operating costs are included in a monthly fee. And since you are paying for the processing power instead of a server's capacity, you will save money over the time. And secondly, because it is ICT-led requirements. Many of ICT officers wish that they use cloud earlier. With cloud, there will be less software to be installed at the end user workstation and less maintenance job to do. Cloud also provides security and standardization that acquired from well-known security standards. It all brings the confidence to the ICT officer and security officer. And with cloud, we could grow our application faster. Imagine a situation where we want to increase memory in our physical servers. We will go through the budget approval process first, and we will need to figure out our server's supported model of RAM. And then after we purchase the RAM, to do the installation, we need to power down the server before we can slot in the RAM. With cloud model, it is an agile business model that enables simplifying process for delivering infrastructure service offerings and improving how infrastructure teams and development teams work together. So what it is cloud, or what it is inside the cloud? Does it comprise of a bunch of a virtual machine? Or does cloud require internet connection 24/7? Or is cloud just a buzzword? Because nowadays, people will always talk about cloud. Is it just because the trend that the market have sets? Actually, cloud is more than that. It's not just a bunch of virtual machines, but it have the compute, networks, storage, applications, and services. Fundamentally, cloud computing is a model for enabling universal, convenient, on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing resources that can be rapidly provisioned and released with minimal management effort. And then this is the three key features that unique to the cloud. First, because it used the abstraction technology. Cloud was built by using virtual abstraction that enable the rapid deployment of applications and data to reduce the cost and the complexity of providing the infrastructure. And if you have experience with the virtualization, it is actually something like that. Just with cloud, your virtualization scope is bigger. Second key features is the elasticity. If scalability is the ability to increase the resource on demand, elasticity is the ability to increase or decrease automatically. I would like to give example. When you quickly provision a new infrastructure to handle a high load of traffic, and then you realize that after that rush, you leave all the new instances running, your bill will rise and you will be paying for unused resources. In worst case scenario, these resources can even cancel out revenue from the sudden rush. So an elastic system prevents this from happening. It is where after scale-up period, your infrastructure can scale back down, meaning you will be only paying for your usual resource usage and some extra for the high traffic period. And then next, the OPEX. OPEX is the funds that an organization used to run and operate its day-to-day business. In cloud, they use pay-as-you-go model, which is it is an OPEX. This means the total resources and usage of the services that you subscribe in the cloud for that month will be your monthly expenses. While compared to setting up an infrastructure at your premise, it will require capex that is depending on your yearly budget allocation. This approach runs the risk of the investment becoming outdated or outgrown before it has paid for the value itself. Then, what is the types of cloud service model? Nowadays, cloud offering of services divided to multiple model, which is known as infrastructure as a service or IaaS. IaaS is a cloud service model that provides us the infrastructure such as servers, storage or load balancers as services. It can be quickly scale up and scale down with demand, letting us to pay only for what we use. It is what the originally cloud is all about. And secondly is PaaS or platform as a service. It is where the organization does not have to manage the infrastructure or the operating system, but they want to provide a platform for their application team to develop their application for a period of their subscription. And then this not to be confused with software as a service or SaaS, where everything is hosted and managed by the software vendor. No software development involving in SaaS because the primary target of SaaS is the end user. And as the primary SaaS offering, of course, is ArcGIS Online. With ArcGIS Online, user able to generate map, use the map, and share it without have to think about the infrastructure, the operating system, and the framework that they need to be built. And for ArcGIS Enterprise, we have a choice of using IaaS to provide the underlying infrastructure in the cloud. Esri provides specialized deployment tools to make it easier to install and configure the software on a certain cloud platforms. And then what type of cloud deployment that the cloud have? In the public cloud, we share the same hardware, storage, and network devices with other organizations or cloud tenants. We access the services and manage our account using a web browser. And the most popular public cloud provider is AWS, which is owned by Amazon, and Microsoft Azure, which is owned by Microsoft. And then there also another cloud provider like IBM, Google, Oracle, or Alibaba Cloud. Second type of cloud deployment is private cloud. So a private cloud consists of a computing resource that exclusively owned by a business organization. This model will need to be managed by organization own internal resources, and all infrastructure will be paid by the organization itself. Compared to public cloud, where we only pay for the service that we use regarding how large the physical infrastructure they are. However, private cloud is more trusted by organizations who have priority in keeping their data private. And for organizations that need to operate with large amount of data, we'll also see that the investment in private cloud is more cost effective rather than renting a cloud storage. And the third types of the cloud deployment is the hybrid cloud. Actually, it is a mix of a private and public cloud. In a hybrid cloud, data and application can move between private and public clouds for greater flexibility and more deployment options. Example of deployment option for hybrid cloud is like an organization who want to keep its production environment in private cloud and a recovery environment in a public cloud. So both environment ready to spin up as necessary. And we have a virtual private cloud or VPC. It is offered by certain public cloud provider like AWS and Google. Actually, VPC can automatically set up your virtual topology, configuring prefix range for your subnets and network policies, or you can configure your own IP segment within the public cloud. It means you can bring your on-premise network segment to your cloud for easier and seamless application experience with the benefit of using cloud scalable infrastructure. So where is your source of reference if you want to know more about ArcGIS security in the cloud? You can open your browser and go to trust.arcgis.com. It is a single source for security, privacy, and compliance information within Esri software. It can provide you with security alerts and announcement where all the latest release of critical security patch for ArcGIS software will be updated here. It also provides articles on designing enterprise GIS security best practices. If you go to the document section, there are a lot of presentation documents that explain about how to plan and design enterprise GIS deployment with the security strategy and guidelines provided by the experts. And lastly, on this website, we can report on the security and privacy concerns through a web form that provided. And to continue the session today, I also want to share about these three main aspects in security. First, what it is a risk management approach, and then what is shared responsibility model that provided by cloud providers, and then what is the importance of security by design. Uh, Usually, cloud implementation represents a range of risks which need to be assessed and controls applied to mitigate the identified risks. So we try to look at security from a more holistic risk management approach, working from the whole to the part, and from there we define what we need to implement in terms of security controls. And as already mentioned, a key aspect of cloud security is that cloud providers already implement a significant level of security in the underlying in their underlying infrastructure, and they also provide configuration options for customers to apply security within the cloud environment. So we need to be aware of what the delineation of responsibilities they are. And then once we understand the responsibilities and the scope, we can start to define our security design in conjunction with the overall solution design. Security by design is an approach to software and hardware development that seeks to make systems as free of vulnerabilities and resistant to attack as possible. One way to formalize the risk management approach is to adopt a framework, such as this framework that's known as the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. The objective of the NIST Cybersecurity Framework is to identify a prioritized, flexible, repeatable, performance-based, and cost-effective approach to keeping data secure. There are 5 elements in these frameworks, which are identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. For identify stage, it is the starting which a process that organization can implement to develop a document that identifies and lists out the threats, vulnerabilities that could give impact and expose risk to their assets. And second element is protect. In this process, we develop and implement appropriate safeguards to ensure delivery of critical services. And third is detect, where during this process, we develop and implement appropriate activities to identify the occurrence of a cybersecurity event. And during the response stage, we develop and implement appropriate activities to act regarding a detected cybersecurity incident. This incident, when it happens, will list several levels of impacts toward the affected assets. So we must plan how we act collectively to minimize the damage impact being spread to other assets nearby. And during recover, we develop and implement appropriate activities to maintain plans for resilience and to restore any capabilities or service that were impaired due to a cybersecurity incident. So what we can learn from this framework is we can use it as a benchmark for our current security posture. Going through each category and subcategories in the core function can help us to determine where we stand on the cybersecurity preparation. So next, after we learn how to manage our risk before we decide to move into cloud, it is critical to understand that the shared responsibility model. It is because it defines which security responsibility are handled by the cloud provider and which parts are responsibility of the customers. Basically, customer responsibility is what's inside the cloud. That's mean when the customer subscribe to the cloud services, customers must be responsible for what they choose to subscribe, such as the virtual machines, the selection of the storage, the selection of the operating system, and if it is the customer's responsibility to configure and protect the data that is stored and transmitted to the cloud. A misconfigured server can affect how the data is stored in the service that is protected. While for cloud service provider, in summary, their responsibilities is on their physical environment. Starting from building the host for the data center itself, they must apply security process and policies that ensure the infrastructure is protected from unauthorized physical access. And they need to ensure the power is maintained in a highly available method. And if in the case the disaster strikes, the service should fade over to a new physical location or and providing continued services. And other physical security considerations are capabilities such as cooling and air management, device management, and power regulation. So this is a list of infrastructure controls that offered by AWS Amazon. So cloud provider have set some infrastructure controls that their customer can can use to operate their daily to operate their infrastructure. And even though the cloud provider is responsible for the infrastructure of the cloud, they also provide their customer with some controls and features. First, they provide an IAM, uh, that stands for Identity and Access Management. So with IAM, it enables you to manage access to AWS services and its resources securely from everywhere using internet connections. So you can create and manage AWS users and group and use permission control to allow and deny their access to the AWS resources like the machine instance and applications. And in terms of network access control, they also provide their customer with ability to have VPC, like I said in the slide earlier. VPC is one of the cloud deployment type that we can choose. It can automatically set up your virtual topology and subnet within their hosted public cloud. Beside that, inside AWS console, we can configure the security of our instance from two levels. First, from the subnet level, and secondly, from the instance level itself, where they call it as security groups. Other than that, AWS also provide the customer with the ability of network intrusion prevention. And under the logging and monitoring, we can monitor and configure our instance logging by using AWS Cloud Trail. With that, we can continuously monitor and retain account activity related to action across our AWS infrastructure. And then there are also other parts of the infrastructure log that can be monitored, such as the application log, WAF log, this is web application firewall, infrastructure drift log, and so on. And for instance management, AWS provide a system manager. It provide their customer with the visibility and control of their infrastructure within AWS. So system manager simplifies resource and application management, shortens the time to detect and resolve operational problems, and make it easy to operate and manage the infrastructure securely at scale. Then AWS also have Patch Manager to automate the process of patching Windows and Linux managed instances. Use this feature of AWS System Manager to scan the instances for missing patches and scan and install missing patches. And under the encryption parts, you will have option to make sure that your traffic is encrypted in transit using a TLS protocol. You can create an encrypted file system, so all your data and metadata encrypted at the server level. So for encryption and decryption, it's all handled automatically and transparently. So we do not have to modify our applications inside our servers. And for physical security, of course, it's also being handled by a cloud provider that should have an access control to their data center and have security controls by installing CCTV, securing their building parameters, and so on. And if we do comparison of shared responsibility model with the type of cloud model, we can imagine how we want to plan and design the security of our ArcGIS platform deployment in the cloud. To the left is for ArcGIS Enterprise, where we can deploy in private cloud or public cloud. And then to the right is a SaaS cloud model where ArcGIS Online takes place in this comparison. So if we look at the customer responsibility parts, ArcGIS Online leave customer with a less security responsibility, while implementing ArcGIS Enterprise will require customers with more security responsibility depending on the underlying infrastructure deployment. deployment type. By knowing this responsibility, we will be able to focus on our scope that matters and will not miss our responsibility when it is being implemented. By doing that, we are on the road of achieving security by design concept. So if we go deeper into what are the customer responsibilities, we have listed some of the responsibilities for ArcGIS deployment in the cloud. You can see from the list where customers need to make sure their connection to the cloud is secure. So the network routing, firewalls, and proxies on-premise is under customer responsibility. So the best way to use cloud is by using the provided VPN connection, which is encrypted to ensure the security of the connectivity. And then for the guest operating system administration, customers need to make sure that the root access to the OS is controlled and have scheduled for a patch on the operating system. And for configuration of IDP, customer must be aware of the account that provided for accessing the IDP database. Do not give read-write access to the account that used to query the IDP database. And customer also must understand that the definition of portal security policy settings, where it enables customer to provide security policy setting to ArcGIS portal, such as allowing portal access through HTTPS only, allow anonymous access, or multi-factor authentication. That's all features can be enabled through ArcGIS portal or ArcGIS online. And for management of identities permitted to the portal, customer need to control who can access to the portal, and customer need to control who can access to the certain account, and also set account lockout policy after few failed login attempts. And then customer can make use of group management in ArcGIS portal or ArcGIS online to limit the privacy to the member of the group only. Beside of that, customer can control permission by implementing roles assignment. So an admin must understand each role's capability, so he will be careful when giving user roles. And for data discovery and assessment, customer need to know what the data assets that they have, and customer must classify it whether it is public or private. So they will be careful to publish it into the cloud. Then customer need to make sure the development process are well planned and designed without leaving security aspects into the picture. As example, we can prepare the security requirement at the early stage, such as the confidentiality, integrity towards the data. So process like encryption or data masking can assist in ensuring data and process confidentiality. And then the penetration test or vulnerability test. As security best practices, Esri also encourage their customers to engage third party to do a penetration test. So as a result, they will know which level of compliance that they are. So this is my last slide. And to wrap up the session today, I would like to highlight that if you consider moving into cloud, you must think and analyze the risk that could rise in terms of the security. Risk is must be managed, and risk is everywhere, whether in cloud or in premise, but it must be managed and minimized. And for ArcGIS platform itself, it can be deployed in the cloud, whether it is private cloud or public cloud or hybrid cloud, as long it meets the operating system and resources requirements. And I think I will stop here, and thanks everybody for keep listening until the end. I hope you learned something from this session. I pass it back to Ame.
Thank you, Akmal. There was an interesting presentation on the ArcGIS security in the cloud, as you can see. So we've had a couple of questions coming through, and if you've been listening intently to Akmal and you haven't had the chance to type out your question, there's still some time left, so you can do that in the question pane. So just to kick off, we have a question from the attendee here. Muaz is asking, if we wanted to deploy ArcGIS Enterprise in the cloud, which cloud provider is more suitable and compatible with Esri software? Over to you, Akmal.
Thank you, Moaz. Thank you, Moaz, for the questions. So for cloud provider selection, Esri didn't restrict to any cloud provider because actually Esri support any cloud provider that, as I presented earlier, we just need to make sure that the cloud provider can provide the supported operating system and the resources that required by the ArcGIS deployment. But Esri do have some rating of their products compatibility with cloud provider, and the highest rating is given to AWS and then followed by Azure. For both, Esri have their tools to simplify the installation process for their customer to deploy the ArcGIS Enterprise, whether in AWS or in Azure. I hope that answered the question.
Okay, that's great. So let's go to the next question. We have a question from Major Hasnul Hadi Karim. The question is, Akmal, can you explain why do we need HTTPS instead of HTTP? Akmal, over to you.
Okay, so why we need HTTPS instead of HTTP? Basically, it is the same protocols, just the HTTPS is more secure because it is encrypted. So let's say like if you go to your online banking, and then if you can see that they are using HTTP, I believe you want done your transaction there, because everything that transmitted through the internet is not encrypted. So with HTTPS, the connection is encrypted. So as a customer, we want our application and our form that we submit over internet is uh, invisible to the public. So in case if there is some attackers that grab our packet or our data, they could not see the content inside the packets. So that's the use of the HTTPS, and that's why we for ArcGIS product, we promoting a user to use HTTPS because of that security features that HTTPS offer is more secure than the HTTP. So I hope that's answered the question.
Okay, so moving on to the next question, we have one from Shuhada Zahari. So the question, Akmal, is, when you said virtual private network, VPC, okay, do we have to ensure our own risk management? So is there any physical server that is not parked in our own building? Okay, so I repeat the question. When you said virtual private cloud, do we have to ensure our own risk management? And is there any physical server that is not parked in our own building? Over to you, Ahmad.
Okay, thanks for the question. Okay, for the VPC, uh, actually it still categorized under the public cloud. So the risk is still there. So if you refer to the shared responsibility model, uh, for the public cloud case, that's mean the users still need to handle the software parts, the operating system parts, and configuration parts, but the infrastructure part still being handled by the cloud provider. Just the difference is in VPC we can bring our network segment, such as we have at our on-premise network, we're using a certain subnet, so we can replicate that segment inside the public cloud. So the application, when we want to move to the VPC, there will no reconfiguration that need to be done. Like example, if we have our applications that depend on the IP address, such as for licensing, it tied to the IP address, or for the application routing, it tied to the IP address. So in this case, VPC provide their customer with this ability to have the same IP within the public cloud. Because normally, if you don't use VPC, you will get the something like the public IP for your servers. So that's not sometimes it's not seamless to the application level. And then in terms of hardware, uh, it depends actually. If you like you want to implement that on premise, you want to have your production, or you want everything to park at the public cloud. So if you plan to have everything to park everything in the public cloud, so that's no servers that will be parked on your premise. Just you need to make sure that on your premise, the user will have the internet connection to access to the public cloud. I hope that's answered the questions.
Okay, thank you, Akmal. So moving on to the next question that we have here from Bong TK. Government usually declines to put data online as they have less confidence with the online security. So is it possible for Esri Malaysia to convince government online security that it is secure? So meaning, is it possible for Esri Malaysia to convince so that we move to the cloud environment? How do we do that? So I believe that maybe reflects on some of the things that you have highlighted in the slide, maybe the trust or ArcGIS and stuff like that. So if you can elaborate on that, Akmal.
Yes, actually, one thing that we can convince the customers is by stating that actually the cloud provider also have the compliance that they have gone through, such as and that's compliance is global compliance that provided by the cloud security provider. So in terms of confidence, if we go to the trust.arcgis.com, we can see what are the aspect that we can choose to put the customers into the security situation. Like as I said in the my presentation earlier, we have make sure that the cloud provider that we selected must have this certificate and compliances that just not being issued to by the global provider, that also by the local authorities provider. Like in case of government, I believe they have some guidelines from and for government, I believe it is from Mampu. Okay, so they also if they refer to the guidelines that provided by Mampu, there is some criteria that that being stated there. So the government agencies can refer to that documents or the criteria. So uh, by showing that to the customer, I think they should be more confident with because it is supplied by their own agencies, not like by the public bodies. So in case of that, I think I believe that the the agencies should be more confident with the regulation that being set by their own agencies. So I hope that can answer the questions.
Okay, thank you, Akmal. So we are moving on to the next question that we have here. One from Shanmugam. So the question goes, in terms of security, our company rely on contractors to maintain its base on trust. So if we were to move to a cloud-based environment, how do we put our trust to the cloud providers? Over to you, Akmal.
Okay, in terms of trust, actually we can trust cloud provider like we trust other cloud services such as Gmail or Dropbox, and I believe many of us are using that cloud services. And many other software providers also move from a traditional on-site license method to cloud subscription. Like example, the Microsoft Office. Before this, they only offered the installation-based software, and now they're offering us the cloud-based software. And even for antivirus or backup software, I believe they also have their cloud-based subscription software, and that I think will prove that we should trust. That's because of that we should trust the cloud services, and also we can basically check from the software provider website. In terms of the cloud provider, we can check from their websites whether they are in compliance with the cloud security standards. So such example, the security standard that we all know for IT security is the ISO 2007-0001, and these are international standards. And then there also FEDRAMP. That's also the global standards for the cloud security provider. I think that's could answer the questions.
Okay, thank you, Akmal. So that's all the time we have today. So if we have not answered your questions, so I believe there are some more. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time. So I believe Akmal will surely reach out to you with the response. So moving on to the last slide, we really love your feedback. So take the time to fill out the brief survey that you will see pop up at the end of the session. So any further feedback or questions can be sent directly to events@esrimalaysia.com.my. I would like to thank Akmal again, and thanks everyone for joining us, and we will see you for the next Direction Live online webinar series. Goodbye.